I'm really happy that people are joining us this evening. My name is Jody Dean, and I'm a member of the Geneva, New York branch of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And I'm going to get our discussion of socialism and electoral politics started by thinking about campaigns and elections. Then I'll talk specifically about the PSL program and the fight for socialism, a system where production is for the benefit of the people and the planet, not for the enrichment of the few. So what is an election? Most generally, we think of elections as events where people choose their leaders or representatives. The right and opportunity to choose one's leaders is supposed to be the hallmark of democracy. But there has to be more to it than that, right? Because if it were just about the right to choose, then people could throw dice or play eeny, meeny, miny, mo, or randomly pull names out of a hat, right? They'd still be choosing. But elections aren't just about choosing. They're supposed to be about informed choice, about having reasons for one's choices. We vote for candidates because we support their positions. We vote for them because we agree with them, we admire them. Maybe we think they'd be good for the country or the community, or maybe because we totally hate the other guy. Usually we talk about this as making an informed choice and emphasize things like learning about the issues, knowing a candidate's record, knowing where they stand and what they're likely to do. So elections aren't just about a choice. They're about learning, they're about sharing and considering information and ideas. Electoral campaigns are major opportunities to get people thinking and talking about the direction of the country or the community, and get people thinking and talking about shared goals, about priorities. Campaigns can actually even generate shared goals and priorities as they bring more and more people into conversations about what matters. Now, the mainstream media and the two capitalist parties usually push this collective and educational aspect of elections aside, especially during presidential campaigns. All they talk about is voting. Politics is boiled down to individual choices at one single moment, as if this were all that mattered, as if democracy was just one choice between two capitalist and imperialist parties every 4 years. Notice how the media constantly reports on polls about how people are likely to vote, spending more and more time and space on predictions than they do on issues, on people's actual needs and concerns. But elections are more than voting, right? Because if voting could change the system, the capitalists would never let us vote. In the Party for Socialism and Liberation, we view elections as opportunities to learn and talk about the most important issues affecting the majority of people, the diverse, multinational, multi-generational, women, men, and non-binary people of differing abilities who comprise the working class broadly understood and located not just in the United States. We don't think that elections will lead to real substantial changes, particularly the ones most people want to see. We know that that will require a revolution made in our streets, workplaces, and communities to claim power for the people. Our campaign exposes the limits of what the capitalist parties have on offer, how they can't even promise more of the same, but instead give us increasing exploitation, racism, policing, gendered violence, and war. PSL aims to highlight the demands of working and oppressed people that the Democrat and Republican candidates refuse to meet. We offer a socialist alternative because socialism is the only way to secure a future where the majority of the people and the planet will thrive. The Gloria La Riva and Sunil Freeman campaign lets us get our message out, helping us build the movement for socialism. So think about it. What would you really like to hear from a presidential campaign this year? How about free healthcare, Medicare for all instead of parasitic insurance companies, a national COVID-19 plan with massive free rapid testing, free PPE and hazard pay, a guaranteed income for everyone who needs it? We don't hear that. Wouldn't you like to hear that rents, mortgages, evictions, and foreclosures were canceled? That would take away a lot of fear and anxiety, not to mention the very real risk of homelessness. But we don't hear that. Wouldn't you like to hear that ICE and deportations have been brought to an end? That full equality for all LGBTQ people was totally guaranteed? That women could have free, safe, and legal abortions on demand? We don't hear that. And with the new Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett, we are actually hearing the opposite. Wouldn't you like to hear a presidential candidate recognize, oppose, and insist on ending structural racism, systemic police brutality, and mass incarceration? And insist that killer cops like those who murdered George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Daniel Pruitt, and so many others be convicted and jailed? We don't hear that. Instead of the pathetic and deadly machismo of who can be the most militarist, wouldn't you like to hear that US bases abroad were being closed, its imperialist blockades, sanctions, and wars brought to an end? We don't hear that. And why don't we hear any of that? Because the mainstream media and Presidential Debate Commission refused to listen to the one person who centers them in her campaign, Gloria La Riva. Gloria La Riva's campaign brings out the demands that come from people's movements, from long-term and ongoing struggles against oppression. She's saying what so many of us want to hear, what we fight for and believe. And you can find out more at lariva2020.org. She's saying what we want to hear because she has been in these struggles her whole life, joining people in the streets and listening to what we say about our lives. The fight for socialism in the United States will not be won through elections. It will be won through working class organizing, the development of socialist consciousness and revolution. I expect that everyone here tonight knows this. The Democratic Party fights against even the fullest socialist advance with every ounce of its strength, promising at the same time to reach across the aisle and work with a party comprised of white supremacists, climate denialists, sexists, and exploiters who pursue profit over people. Our campaign takes the long view. Reforms can make a difference, but real change, real justice, the lives and demands of real people requires revolution. So I've started us off tonight with an overview of PSL's approach to elections and our platform, which again, you can learn more about at and get involved in at lariva2020.org. And I'm now going to hand this over to my comrade Hannah, who's going to turn our attention to socialist politics and struggle at the local level.
Comrades, hi friends. I'm so happy to be talking with you this evening and learning from you. And it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce some remarks from Laura Salamandra, a working class fighter here in Geneva, New York, who ran and won a city council seat in Geneva, New York as a socialist. We believe she is in fact the first socialist to have ever won a city council seat in Geneva. She is unfortunately not able to join us this evening in person because the city council has called an emergency budget meeting, which I think is just a sort of perfect example of what's possible and not possible when you run as a socialist in a small town like Geneva. So this city council in this budget meeting as we speak is working hard to add all of the austerity cuts they can find to strip from the city budget those very, very meager things that are offered to working class people. And Laura consistently shows up to those meetings and fights. Unlike the Democrats and the Republicans on that council who approach those meetings from a position of conciliation, from already anticipating what can't be won, Laura shows up and she fights with her comrades for those things that have never been fought for before. So fingers crossed at the end of this budget meeting, some of the slashes to food access, transportation access for this people in the city of Geneva will be restored. But even if they're not, having a socialist on city council means the people know they have a fighter in their corner with a strong party standing behind her, fighting for all of us. So I'm going to share my screen and share with you some of the remarks from Councillor Salamandra, and will be available to answer any questions you have about that campaign or the work we've been doing as socialists on City Council. So bear with me just for 1 second. All right, comrades, is this video visible to you? Okay.
Yes.
Every election is like the last one, and that's why nothing changes. People don't get to choose a candidate they actually agree with. You've all heard it. They're choosing the lesser of two evils. But what if we didn't have to? We wanted to give the people of Geneva a real political choice, a chance to articulate their real problems and priorities, and a chance to imagine what a Geneva for all of us would actually look like. So much is governed on a local level: housing, police, transportation, food access. The city's budget lays out the priorities, and until a socialist was part of those conversations, none of those priorities reflected the needs and interests of working class people. People pay attention to elections because they see that politics and elections are impacting their lives on a local level, and there are no alternatives. When people wake up to see that our landlords are political, lobbying against rent relief, they see they have to be political too. But who do they have to fight for them? The people deserve candidates that won't sell them out. A government by and for the people means just that. Working class people are done electing people to make decisions for us. We are more qualified to discuss housing than landlords, more qualified to discuss food access than people who have never been hungry, more qualified to make decisions about transportation than people who have never taken a bus, and certainly more qualified to discuss police terror than those who have never experienced it. A communist commitment to the liberation of working class people is incorruptible. And isn't that what people want most? In the summer of 2019, we launched Geneva's first socialist city council campaign with a block party. We had a free clothing pop-up, PSL literature table, potluck food and games for kids. Unlike other campaign events that lecture, ask for money, or tell folks what they need, this initial block party provided mutual aid, a space for working class families to spend time together, and demonstrated that this was a campaign run by organizers, not the usual political establishment. The center of the campaign was a 10-point platform we developed. 1, permanently protect and increase access to the lakefront. 2, development should be sustainable and serve the needs of the people of Geneva. 3, safe, affordable housing for all Genevans. 4, invest in public transportation infrastructure that meets the needs of the community. 5, expand access to quality, affordable, long-day childcare, universal pre-K, and youth summer programming. 6, public schools that meet the needs of every student and treat them with dignity. 7, no more food insecurity in the food and beverage capital of the Finger Lakes. 8, community oversight of the police. 9, transparency in the business of the city and increase community participation in city decisions. 10, guarantee that survivors of gender-based violence receive non-judgmental support and are not punished. The platform reshaped Geneva politics in a number of ways. 1, it articulated a clear sense of political priorities supported by the vast majority of Genevans. 2, for many Genevans, this was the first time they saw a political program that concerned their struggles. As one resident put it, Laura is the only counselor who has ever cared about the butt end of Geneva. 3, it aided successful canvassing. The platform articulated clear issues about which to engage Geneva residents. The points concerning food insecurity and community control over policing generated the most enthusiasm and political conversation. 4, it thrust popular socialist politics into the political institutions of Geneva. The Democratic Committee adopted the platform after much struggle in nearly its entirety. The Republican Committee parroted a number of the points. The newspaper, the major political party, the League of Women Voters were all required to take a socialist platform seriously because it was the most serious platform there was, and it was the most popular. What can socialists in government accomplish? Everything and anything that has been off of the table. Once people can see how differently socialists act, that they can completely count on me, they get braver and they demand more. Among the lessons learned from actually winning a city council seat as the lone socialist in an old boy crony political machine is that the entire system is threatened by the introduction of a socialist who tells the truth and a party of disciplined, professional cadre committed to being with the people. And the socialist message is getting through. This has been especially true since city council meetings became accessible via Zoom. Public comment has become the site of political struggle. Meetings occur at least weekly, and hundreds of people are watching council meetings and work sessions. Many of these people can see for themselves what socialism is, and they're having practical political experiences with each other inside and outside of bourgeois government. The socialist message also gets out in the streets, at teach-ins, demonstrations, and in one-on-one conversations, group conversations, and email threads. The effects of this work could be seen in the increased courage of people speaking at city council and at demonstrations. The preparation for city public comment, recommendations to council, and co-authored emails are collective endeavors that are sharpening the consciousness of those people most engaged in the police struggle and other important struggles like the city budget, food access, and support for those economically impacted by COVID and the recession. It is also showing the people what socialism really is. While some liberals in Geneva have distanced themselves from socialism in this period, others on social media and at public comment and in the newspaper are defending socialism and socialists based on what they experience rather than adopting anti-communist national talking points. At its core, the City Council project works to reveal the failures of bourgeois democracy to solve the urgent problems of people in Geneva, while holding up the courage, discipline, and capacities of the people. The example of a socialist city councilor who fights for justice within the institutions of bourgeois government and also in the street, supported by a fighting socialist party, demonstrates day after day to the people of Geneva what is possible under a different system. That the police struggle, one of the most popular points of the campaign platform, has become the central struggle within council and around our city, demonstrates that socialists will take up even those political problems that are the hardest to talk about and change, and address the most repressive elements of the state, even at great personal cost. For the entire history of Geneva, there have only been Dems and Republicans. We have demonstrated that we can run on what you believe in and that we can win. In Geneva, there is no longer a two-party system. We have taken the first steps to break away from the good old boys club status quo, and the people are beginning to see just how much is possible and demanding a better future for themselves and their whole city.
All right. Thank you, Comrade Laura. Hope the budget meeting's going well. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Mona to talk to us a little bit more about the PSL and the Gloria La Riva campaign.
Thank you, Comrade Laura. And I'm so inspired that I'm almost speechless. But I've been a member of PSL for about 6 months. And as an activist in and out of social justice and leftist movements for decades, I realized a few years ago that something was missing. And when I thought about this, I understood that it was my involvement in the landlord-busting, anti-gentrifying tenant movement in my neighborhood in New York City in the 1970s and 80s that taught me the power and excitement of focused collective action. And I knew that that New York City tenant movement was founded and led primarily by communists. And they really knew what they were doing. And they belonged to a party. So less than 2 years ago, I came to see the need for a party, and I wanted a contemporary, revolutionary socialist party, because I believe that's what's essential for fighting and dismantling capitalism and for creating the kind of society I want. An expertly led, carefully organized party has what Occupy-style movements and other leftist organizations and causes lack. PSL has a history and deep roots that nourish new branches and buds. The party has continuity to build upon and the unity, effectiveness, and comradely support that comes with democratic centralism. PSL asks a lot of its members. Our political education for new members is extraordinarily rich, stimulating, and required. In addition, in our region, we are extremely fortunate to have a Lenin reading group led by Comrade Jody and open not only to members, but to friends of PSL or people like some of you, just interested, curious to learn about revolutionary socialism. Although PSL began in 2004, many of its leaders have been in the struggle against capitalism and imperialism and for justice and liberation for all people internationally for many decades before 2004. These leaders bring wisdom, their experience through struggle, and their practical know-how to the many young members who have joined us in our most recent decade. Comrade Gloria La Riva is one of these leaders. The video we've chosen for you to see here tonight is from 2009. We chose this one for practical and technological reasons and also for political reasons. Practical and technological because of the format here tonight, and political because one thing that distinguishes PSL and a key reason for many of us, including myself, for joining PSL is its internationalism, its clear and relentless fight against neocolonialism and imperialism. I urge you to check out the many more recent videos of Gloria on YouTube and through the Liberation News website, videos which show her today in New Jersey, New York City, Washington, DC, Lake Charles, Louisiana, and throughout the country. Be assured that the fire and passion Comrade Gloria exudes at this rally in San Francisco in 2009 continue and inspire us today. Her unflinching commitment and her compassionate, tireless work for and with working and exploited people in this country and throughout the world compel us to join together and fight together as hard, as strategically, and as fearlessly as we can for socialism. Thank you.
Thank you for those remarks, Mona. All right, screen share project again, onto the Gloria video.
Please welcome Gloria La Riva. She's from the National Campaign to Free the Cuban Five.
Sisters and brothers, on such an important day today for the Palestinian people, I salute everybody who's here today, because your individual action and determination to protest against the brutal repression of the Palestinian people and their denial of a homeland by the United States. It's important to stand up today for Palestine. And I think every time we meet here at UN Plaza or anywhere else in San Francisco, and every time I walk the streets of San Francisco and see how many people are homeless in the street and live under miserable, dangerous conditions of poverty. Those in the street, those in the SROs, those those who go hungry every day, the children who don't have sufficient education in the classroom, the teachers, the healthcare workers who face layoffs. And then we see that billions of dollars are poured into Israel to murder Palestinians and deny them their homeland, to bomb their homes, to destroy the place that they live. And then the people here are lied to about the role of Israel. It makes me say today, I salute every one of you who stands up for Palestine. If the people of the United States knew how much of their tax dollars and all their efforts for their own lives and home were going toward repression in Palestine, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and now Pakistan, or anywhere else that the U.S. has 700 military bases, they would shut down the government's operation immediately, because the people of the U.S. are not for genocide. They just don't know enough of what's going on. And so our presence is the conscience of the people of this country. And there's another people who always stood side by side with Palestine, and that is Cuba, revolutionary socialist Cuba. Cuba has helped in every way possible. And for as besieged as they are by U.S. blockade, there's never been a time that they have not given to Palestine in their just cause. I was in Cuba last November, and I was on a bus, and I met a young Palestinian woman from Ramallah who was studying medicine along with hundreds of other Palestinian youth for free in Cuba. And she plans to go home to help her people. That's what Cuba does. And that's exactly why there are 5 men called the Cuban Five imprisoned in the United States. Because as the U.S. was tightening its blockade and planning more terrorist attack against Cuba, which has already killed 3,400 people in the 50 years of revolution, the Cuban Five came into Miami to defend the country of Cuba against U.S.-sponsored terrorism in Miami. And I want to say, sisters and brothers, for the time that you have on Monday, June 15, please come to the rally that we're going to have at this new federal building to my left on Mission Street, no, on 7th Street between Mission and Market. We're going to have a demonstration for the Cuban Five because Monday, June 15, the U.S. Supreme Court, that reactionary institution of lifelong appointees, is going to be deciding whether to accept the appeals of the Cuban Five, who were only defending their country against terrorism. So we ask for your support. Political prisoners have a very hard time, whether it's Mumia Abu-Jamal or Leonard Peltier and so many others in the United States, and the Cuban Five as well. We will keep fighting for their freedom until they're home in Cuba, and we will keep fighting along with you till Palestine is free, and Palestine will be free.
Thank you for that, Comrade Mona. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here today. My name is Clara Valenzuela. I am a candidate member of the PSL here in Ithaca. I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about why I joined a socialist party, my journey to socialism, and why I think it's important to be a socialist, particularly as a young person. So I actually grew up with conservative Republican parents. I come from a very patriotic military family. And I never really questioned this ideology until high school, when I started to realize America was actually not at all something to feel patriotic about. I witnessed injustices in my community of San Diego against the homeless, against undocumented Latinos, against women, against people of color, against queer people. And so I joined several identity-based activist groups in my high school. And at the time, I felt that progressive electoral politics and diversity and inclusion work was the path to liberation. At no point did I ever think of myself as working class, despite the fact that I did work part-time and full-time all through high school and college, like many other people have to do. I worked to pay my own rent through college. I graduated with tens of thousands of dollars in student debt and medical debt. And I came to realize that the progressive liberal politics I had were actually ultimately unable to address my struggles as a working student. In fact, my experiences as a member of the working class will never and would never be fully addressed by progressive liberal politics, because that would require the admission of capitalism being an inherently oppressive system. No amount of diversity and inclusion work is ever going to help working class people. The Democratic Party would not bring an end to the status quo, but only provide band-aid reformist short-term solutions. It became clear to me that the injustices I was passionate about fighting against in high school were all deeply embedded in capitalist oppression, and that revolutionary change would be the only way to fix the root of the problem. My generation faces unprecedented challenges caused by capitalism: the climate crisis, the debt crisis, issues in healthcare coverage, pervasive white supremacy. We grew up during the War on Terror and during peaks of American imperialist war and violence. The recent Black Lives Matter uprisings have demonstrated the persistence of racial injustice and police brutality, despite the diversity and inclusion work going on. Many of us are trying to establish a career and find a stable job in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis without any financial support from our government. There's currently a crisis of undocumented people being held at the border, of women being forcibly sterilized and kids being separated from their parents with no end in sight. And the Democratic Party will not do anything to directly combat these crises. They have no solution to these problems because the Democratic Party is first and foremost an imperialist and capitalist party. They do not stand with people fighting injustice in the streets, but with corporate capitalists and the interests of the of the ruling class. I joined a socialist party because it is the most effective way of directly addressing the root of oppression, not just in the US, but on a global scale. We work in the streets, on the ground, to build coalitions between all oppressed peoples. The working class is inherently intersectional. There are working class people of color, women, queer folks, trans folks, and we fight for the liberation of all peoples from all oppressive systems. If young people like myself want to build a better future for ourselves and for our children and for humanity, we have to build a socialist future. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Comrade Mario.
Thank you so much, Comrade Clara. I wanna, one of the things that I'm supposed to do in this presentation is to show you how to vote for Gloria La Riva if you feel so inclined. And so I want to just show you an image of the ballot so that you can see how one would do that. And see that red circle? So this is the list of all of the, imperialist, capitalist, oppressive candidates that are available for purchase with your ballot. But then here in that little circled area is where you can articulate your dreams, for a better world and for a better future, right? And you can strike out on your own as someone at the preliminary stages of being a free human being. So humanity begins in that box. And that's where it is. It's right at the bottom of the list. Oh, you just write in Gloria La Riva. You don't have to write in Sanoa Freeman, nor do you have to indicate any political party. Just Gloria La Riva. And she is an official write-in candidate for New York State. So that vote will be counted. And you have to write with the crazy marker that they fill in the bubbles with. So it's going to be a little bit like writing with a crayon. Third parties are essential because the Democratic and Republican parties are parties of the rich. We cannot have an equal society under capitalism because capitalism is a machine that transfers wealth upward into the hands of a few families, even if there are millions of these few families. And that machine stratifies and impoverishes everyone below those families, impoverishing all of us. Capitalism differs from monarchy only in that it liberalizes monarchy. There are many more kings arranged in hundreds of levels, and ascension into kingship no longer depends on bloodlines. Anyone heartless and shrewd enough to bring a population of workers low can become well connected, can become a king. Billionaires are kings, but everyone who owns a business and pays wages is a petty king and exploits a litter of humans. The Democratic and Republican parties are capitalist under this definition. They exist to preserve the exploitation of the workers for the benefit of the owners. The fact that the wealthy few are greater in number today than under monarchy shouldn't fool us. There are more rich today only because there are exponentially more poor, exploited masses. So the corporate parties are okay with our suffering. Their tacit slogan is exploitation forever. So of course they won't listen to us. If we are fighting for a society of a single class, we must work in third parties, and we must discredit the two electoral pillars of capitalism. We must not merely compete with the establishment parties, we must oppose them. They are turbines that tear the human will to shreds, aggregating public wealth in private nodes of power. But we must also only support explicitly socialist parties, because the desire for an equal society is a desire that contradicts the ends of both capitalism and the bourgeois state. In Ithaca right now, there are street movements everywhere. Mutual aid, ITU, Unbroken Promises, Black Hands Universal, Panteras, PSL, and the lovely DSA. The street is learning to govern itself, which means it's beginning to reject capitalism, convulsively, instinctually, but unambiguously. We all want a classless society. A socialist party in Ithaca, running candidates under the PSL, would give an electoral voice to every single demand articulated by the organized street, canceling rents and mortgages, defunding the police, jailing killer cops, firing racist cops, decarceration, housing as a human right. An end to all the artificial barriers that create and reinforce inequality, that separate human populations into economic classes. No more begging the corporate candidates for a few words in an anemic platform. No more begging the rich for anything. Every one of these demands I enumerated will be carried by a socialist candidate and will turn the Common Council floor into an extension of the street. Will pave the town hall floors with asphalt. The Socialist Party itself is only one of the many street movements, and it runs candidates from all of them. And none of the demands of the organized street will be carried by a Democrat, either sincerely or for long, because all of them lead to the abolition of capitalist exploitation, of the racist, sexist, and cisgenderist exploitation that the two corporate parties and the bourgeois state itself were created to preserve. If we protect us, then we must also govern us. A socialist party is an essential development in that process. And now I believe we've come to the Q&A period of our presentation tonight. Is anyone familiar with the rules over, how questions will be taken or how this should go?